He's been away for a few years on his travels to Brighton, Buddhafield, and spent the last, I don't know, months at his son.
14 months.
14 months, gosh. And Arthabandhu's sort of back in the area, and I've sort of reminded, and of course it was only a few years ago, 2 years ago, was it? 2 years ago? Arthabandhu was the chair at the Nottingham Buddhist Centre, and it's been around the Buddhist Centre a long time. So tonight Arthabandhu is going to be doing a talk, the final talk in our series on Buddhist symbols. We've got the intriguing title, The Blue Sky of Sunyata. So I'm really looking forward to that. And Arthabandhu's got a real depth of knowledge about the Dharma. I often feel like it's at his fingertips. And
it's written down in this book.
Well, at your fingertips, as I said. And the thing about Arthabandhu, he's very easy to be with. He's very good company. And I've always found him a very gentle man and a very playful man. And I was very lucky to live with him for a month some years ago. And it's just very easy to be with, very good company. And really enjoy it. Arthabandhu.
Thanks very much for the kind words. Yes, back in Nottingham, we're actually in with Joda and Eve, and it's a bit chilly sometimes, but it's a nice space to be in, and I'm enjoying being with them. I'll just change my view because I'm just talking to myself at the moment. It's a bit off-putting. So nice to be back, and nice to sort of meet you all by giving a talk early on in my arriving here. I've been here about a week now, so settling in and enjoying it. So I'm going to talk about the blue sky, which is of interest to me, and the connection with the Buddhist concept of shunyata, or emptiness, or openness, as it's sometimes translated. So I'll just dive right into the theme of the talk and take you through a few thoughts I've had around it. So firstly, I wanted to sort of connect with the enlightened state, the enlightened consciousness, and how that connects with this idea of the blue sky, this image of the blue sky. So enlightened consciousness, as far as it's possible to put these things into words, it seems to have the quality of spaciousness. There are no limits to it. It doesn't get tight and narrow around any issue or experience. It's always free and open. It's without constriction. There's never any sense of there being barriers or blockages, either conceptually, energetically, or emotionally. So it's very apt that this image of a clear blue sky is used as a symbol for enlightened awareness or enlightened experience. So opposed to this is a more sort of ordinary experience that we probably encounter day to day in our own lives, wherein our consciousness can often feel as though we're sort of trapped at times, or sort of squeezed by life, and we hit limits in our lives, blocks. And these kind of come around again and again to varying degrees of intensity. We might become obsessed with a particular issue in our lives. Something really kind of bugs us or upsets us, and we find we dwell on it. We sort of return to it and orbit it. Could be around some insecurity or some life problem, or or something we crave for or we're averse to. And what seems to happen with the sort of unenlightened consciousness, before we develop these skills and ways of coming at life differently, is that we tighten around these painful experiences. We become small and limited because of this tightening around them. And our sense of anything beyond, at times, our sense of anything beyond these things that bother us, these life concerns that we might have, can really start limit our sense of anything being beyond them. We become very kind of constricted and limited in what we can perceive and sense. So emotionally, we get stuck. Our view is small, and this is relates very much to the Buddhist concept of dukkha, suffering that comes from craving and aversion towards our experience in life. And I think this metaphor, this thinking of it in terms of space, and when it becomes tight and constricted, is quite a useful way of relating to it sometimes. And it makes perfect sense with this image, this symbol of the clear blue sky being so apt for the experience of that all being let go of and experiencing kind of freedom. So I think hopefully I'll be able to sort of demonstrate how this symbol of the clear blue sky can help us start to cultivate this sense of spaciousness and openness, and how to actually bring an image of the blue sky, a clear, limitless blue sky, to mind, can change our experience. Can change our state of mind. So that can be done in the imagination. We can visualize a clear blue sky. We can even visualize some of the symbols that have been discussed and introduced in the previous weeks on Sangha nights, and let those affect us. But the blue sky itself is a strong symbol. But yeah, so it can be imaginatively, but also if you step outside, there is a sky, a real one, and you can just take that in, look at it. It might not always be blue, unfortunately, but just the sense of spaciousness and awareness of that space around us can be can have quite an effect upon our minds and our psyche. So it can be evoked visually, but it can also be evoked kinesthetically, which sort of means through a sort of felt sense in the body, and it can be a combination of those, and probably there's other ways to approach it too. So when it's sort of talked about that you're encouraged to bring to mind a clear blue sky, not only can you connect with the kind of image of that and the sense of that, but you can kind of imagine what it would like to be in the midst of this clear blue sky. How would your body feel if you were in the midst of this clear blue sky? It's not, the idea isn't that it evokes vertigo for you. Hopefully that might be a side effect. It's not desirable. Opening of the body as well as of the mind and the visual senses. You can also go a bit further evolving into this blue sky, including your own body. That's sort of another way that it can be approached. Anyway, it all helps give us a shift in perspective and put us in touch with a sense of vastness and freedom, which are, we're told, qualities of the enlightened consciousness. So I think perhaps also you might be able to see just how this symbol is one that doesn't take a lot of translation, or maybe not any translation at all. It's something that is just part of our lives. We witness a clear sky, we witness a sense of space around us. So it's quite a universal symbol, I think, and I think it probably makes sense across cultures. It doesn't need much explaining in a way. And it's quite likely that without having heard anything of the Buddhist use of this symbol, that you've all at times been affected by it in the ways that it is used within the Buddhist tradition. That it sort of helps to just open up your sense and give you some perspective, and yeah, just sort of brought some uplift into your experience. It's probably one of these things that you don't even realize, that the blue sky around you on a beautiful day is having that impact upon you. It's probably at times quite unconscious that you are uplifted by maybe being out in nature and seeing and being present in this sense of spaciousness. And I think you know, it's not necessary that we think about this symbol just in terms of clear blue sky. I've definitely sort of been strongly moved by looking up at the sky on a clear night and seeing stars sort of stretching off. I don't know how far stars stretch off, but a long way, and just having this sense of vastness and something that in a way I can't fully understand intellectually, and yeah, just that sort of sense of wonder about life and what this is, what's going on, is actually quite a helpful attitude to take. I think a sense it sort of opens us if you can get a sense of that. So in terms of how the blue sky is used in Buddhist practice, there's probably a lot more that could be said than what I'll go into tonight. But I was thinking of what are known in our tradition as sadhana practices, a sort of daily practice that an order member takes on, whereby you visualize a Buddha or a Bodhisattva figure, and through your imagination you start to form a connection to this figure, and allow the qualities that they symbolize to affect you, for you to be uplifted and transformed by that connection with that figure. And what's common to nearly every one of these practices that I've come across or heard about is that part of the structure, how it's kind of built up, this visualization, is that it nearly always begins and ends with a clear blue sky. And also other practices, the bodhicitta practice, although that's not a visualization of a Buddha figure, again, the blue sky features very strongly, very prominently. So this sky is imagined as being absolutely limitless. It's not the ordinary sky in that sense. It's you have a sense of yourself within this clear blue sky, and that in all directions it stretches off infinitely. So there's this sense of physical, spatial limitlessness, infinite space. But also there's other things, other qualities that when you're led in these practices that you're encouraged to kind of look for. And in a way, I think they're quite, they're not hard to see how the blue sky can evoke these qualities. So there's the clarity of a blue sky, a clear blue sky, and it's usually the azure blue sky of a summer's day that is suggested, you sort of bring to mind. So it's bright, it's clear, it's radiant, and it's you can even have a sense of its kind of warmth and the pleasure that it would be to be in that space. I was listening to Vasantra talk on this theme, and it's similar to what Kemasiri was saying before we did the Metta Bhavana this evening, that not only can you imagine it being sort of physically warm and pleasant in this clear blue sky, but it's good to also sort of think of it as emotionally warm, and that metta is kind of almost like a quality of the clear blue sky. The kindness and compassion side of Buddhism is present in this experience as well. So we see in these practices, you do spend a good bit of time just being in this clear sense, with this sense of this clear blue sky, and really resting in that space and letting that have an effect on you. And then what comes next, usually in most of these practices, is that a lotus flower just appears in the midst of the clear blue sky. It's just floating there in this vast blue sky. And what's interesting is the lotus flower isn't made of anything physical. We don't imagine it as anything physical. We think of it, we imagine it as being made of light. And then the image kind of develops, and we see seated upon this lotus flower, which is made of light, a figure. And that will vary between the different practices. So it might be the image of Shakyamuni Buddha, or Manjushri, or another bodhisattva figure. And again, like this lotus flower, the bodhisattva figure themselves isn't physical, isn't made of flesh and blood like ourselves. They're made of light. And in a sense, they're sort of made of the same stuff as the clear blue sky. They've kind of been born from the clear blue sky. And then in these practices, you basically hang out with this bodhisattva, this Buddha. You enjoy being in their presence. It's a bit like transcendental going for a coffee or something like that. But and you just sort of sit with them and enjoy their presence. And in a lot of them, you imagine light pouring from this figure into your body, into your being, and fill it, often sometimes through the crown of the head and into the heart. And you're kind of uplifted and transformed by this connection with this bodhisattva figure. So a very strong, imaginative kind of practice. And then the next thing that tends to happen is in the conclusion of the practice, the whole figure and form of the Buddha and the lotus flower dissolve before our eyes, dissolve into light. And then the light just sort of disappears or is absorbed into the clear blue sky. So a very, very interesting form that these practices take again and again. And it's not just arbitrary. It's not just sort of something someone came up with. I think the form is that it happens in that way is very, very significant and very important. And I've certainly felt it and heard other people comment that it's a shame that the Buddha sort of disappears at the end, or it's a shame that the Buddha's not real, like a flesh and blood person. But in a way, I think those that sort of misses the point, that the fact that the Buddha returns to the clear blue sky, and the fact that the Buddha isn't made of something impermanent, and well, they are made of something impermanent, but not like us, not like the material form that we have. I think this is very much there to tell us something. That's a teaching, and to sort of mess with the form of it, I think, would be to miss that and to lose that teaching. And so it's something that we can just sort of reflect on. I was thinking it's probably something we can kind of ponder in our groups. Why does it have that form to the practice? Why is that so important? Yeah, so I'm going to touch on that a little bit, but I certainly won't exhaust those questions, I don't think. So what can we understand about the blue sky and how the Buddha emerges from it? From what I've said about those practices, why do these meditations unfold in this way? And on one level, the way you understand that is by putting those meditations into practice for a number of years, you really sort of return to them again and again as a daily practice. And it's not that you sort of study why this is the case. It's that you sit with these images, you sit with this whole imaginative world that these practices welcome you into, and you let that have an effect on you. And it's an effect that kind of goes beneath or sort of beyond the rational. It sort of touches us in other ways as well. So so the way to find out what all that means is to take up one of these practices. So that's usually once you're ordained in our tradition. But there's also a value to understanding the concepts that these images, like the blue sky and the Buddha is made of light, understanding them on a conceptual level as well. It's not to say that that's not important. I think you probably wouldn't. You just doing the imaginative side of the practice without any study of the Dharma and the concepts of Buddhism would be probably a bit of a mistake for most people. And it would sort of slow you down if it didn't mean you just got confused. So the concepts that this is pointing to, the clear blue sky, is understood to be Sunyata, and Sunyata is usually translated as emptiness, and it's emptiness of a fixed self or a fixed identity. Sometimes it's openness is the rendering it's given. I think it's Gunther, a German translator, I believe he's German anyway, who talks about Shunyata as the open dimension of being, which I find quite a nice kind of phrase, nice sense of what that's pointing to. So I'm not going to really give you anything exhaustive on the theme of Shunyata. It's a big subject. It's sort of something you really could study and explore for a good long time. And if anything, I'm probably not going to give the usual explanation as to what it's all about. And the fact that we're looking at symbols, I'm probably what I'm going to say in a bit sort of makes it a bit less of a technical approach to what this concept's about. So and I'm returning again to, if any of you were on the weekend retreat that we did online maybe a month or so ago, I mentioned then a Zen teacher called Dogen. I can't remember how long ago he was around, but anyway, Dogen, in one of his aphorisms or one of his poems, he just he's sort of referring to samsara, or the unenlightened experience. He talks about it as the 10,000 things. And I've sort of really taken to this idea of the 10,000 things. I think probably for the modern day, we need to multiply that by another 10 or something. But so he sort of puts across this idea that when we're not enlightened, when we're sort of an ordinary human being, sort of enmeshed in the world that ordinary human beings end up being enmeshed in, we have an experience of just there being all these things in our lives, stuff, people, issues, concerns, the 10,000 things. We're just sort of weighed down by these 10,000 things, this world of stuff. And there's also the thoughts and the obsessions, as well as all the possessions we've got in our life, all the things that clog up our homes and our lives. And in contrast to this, the enlightened experience is not crowded, is not clogged up with this overwhelming amount of stuff. And that's in a way, I think, because to a Buddha, the 10,000 things are just not of interest in the same way they are to a worldling. It doesn't draw them in, doesn't sort of stimulate them or excite them, so they don't get caught up in it. They don't crave for it, and also they don't have any aversion to it. So the 10,000 things sort of don't stick to a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. Instead, their experience is more like just living in this clear blue sky where they're unimpeded by anything. There's no blockages, or there's nothing they don't want to kind of move away from, or nothing they want to kind of move towards. So they just have this sense of ease and space. They're unencumbered. And because of this, there's a kind of freedom, and there's bliss, and an ability to be really creative. Sometimes I think creativity is about sort of letting go of the old ways of thinking and allowing something else to come through. So one way we might be kind of oppressed by the 10,000 things is in the way that we sort of hold on to our ideas and our views, and we don't let them change. We don't let reality kind of modify them for us or undermine them. We don't let other people tell us something other. We might get into arguments and cling to a position. So that's so I think that's sort of one way you could sort of think about what emptiness, this teaching of emptiness, is pointing towards. For a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, it's almost like the world is empty of things. We're less caught up in seeing the world in terms of things and identities and people. We still can have relationships. We still can have metta and connection with each other. But the way that it's sort of cluttered and difficult to kind of move through a world of things for an ordinary person is just not the case for a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. So how do we get from the 10,000 things to the clear blue sky? It might be a process of one thing is removed from the clear blue sky at a time, which probably might take quite a while if there's at least 10,000 things. So I think you could say, to do this, we have to take our focus off the things, loosen our grip on the things and the way we split up the world and have these hard, fixed identities and labels we attach to things. And so you can sort of soften at points where you notice you're kind of gripping or getting kind of literal or tight around something. But you can also start to notice space, start to notice blue sky, if you like, start to look at what else there is other than things and stuff. What else is in our awareness? What else is in the world? And that this can be internally, sort of psychologically, looking at our emotional experience. There might be certain emotions we're very aware of, and then there's a whole side to us that's going on, but we just haven't learned to kind of turn our gaze in a different direction. So there's psychologically sort of your mind in that sense, but there is, I think you'll find, if you sort of decide you're going to just look at space next time you're sort of out on a walk, you'll probably notice it's quite an unusual shift to make, that your focus is usually on the objects, the forms, and to sort of look at the sort of negative of that, to look at all the gaps and all where the sky kind of meets these forms, is quite a weird thing to try, because it's so that's not our habit, that's not our usual concern. So I recommend that as an experiment. So as well as looking for space and starting to experience the thing other than what we normally sort of hook onto, when you are paying attention to space or bringing a sense of the blue sky to mind, really look at what the qualities of that different kind of awareness are. Does it, and it can be helpful just to sort of have a few pointers that actually look for freedom in that altered way of looking. Look for joy, look for lightness. And if someone gives you an instruction like that, it's a bit like when we taught the metta bhavana, that you start looking for metta, and you don't notice it at first, or it's hard to, you notice the other experiences, you notice its opposite, or quite strongly possibly. So with these, looking for these qualities of spaciousness, don't expect anything too big. Look for like the seeds of what I'm sort of talking about here, the seeds of freedom and ease and opening up. So at this point, I thought I'd run through a little practice that features in a book by Rob Berbier, who's a teacher from a different tradition, but yeah, a Buddhist teacher. And here he offers something that I think I quite like, practices where you don't necessarily have to sit down and meditate, but you can be in the queue at your local supermarket or whatever, or you can be on the bus journey, or you've just got a moment, and you can just bring some bit of Dharma to mind, and it can start to just sort of change your experience a little bit. So this is a bit like one of those practices, but also you can really add it to how you approach a meditation, I think, too. So he says that to do this, well, you need to sort of set a bit of an intention to catch yourself the next time your mind kind of latches onto an issue or to a kind of pain or difficulty, and to really notice how it tightens and constricts around this issue. So it could be like the thought of somebody who's been upsetting you recently, or there's some incident that's bothering you, and this comes into your mind, and you notice you sort of collapse in on it and kind of start to orbit it with your energy and your thinking. So that sort of thing is a perfect example of what you could aim to kind of notice. And he says, when you've got this thing, rather than kind of see it as a problem, you can see it as an opportunity to kind of explore what our minds kind of get up to. Yeah, so he says, really notice that constriction, that tightening. Start to really get familiar with that kind of experience. And usually we can kind of get caught up in all of that stuff, but just not be really present in that's happening, not aware that that's currently happening. We just sort of get knocked about by it. So he's saying, well, notice that tightness, that contraction. So then once you've come into contact with that, he then says, what you can then do is deliberately bring your mind towards a sense of spaciousness. And he offers a few different suggestions of different ways in which you can approach that. So the first one, he says, is open up the visual field. And so basically, you just look up and look around you. Look to if you're outdoors, you can look up at the sky. If you're in a room, you can look to the corners of the room, the furthest point of the room. But just relate to look up, look around, take in the space. And what I thought was probably quite common is when you're locked in on your issue or your thing that's bugging you, it's probably quite common that physically you turn in, I think, and you sort of hunch up and sort of look down or tighten around your eyes or something like that. So you'll probably find just the act of looking up and sort of even opening the body just sort of breaks that bit of a vicious circle that you can get into in how we can kind of grasp onto something that bothers us. So yeah, open up the visual field. Notice the space around objects is another one he suggests. And I slipped this one in as well because of the theme of the talk. You can even imagine a clear blue sky. And then the other one is one I've sort of touched on already, is there might be certain feelings and emotions that are very prevalent and strong for you in relation to this issue or whatever it is. And these are sort of front and center. But see if you sort of internally in the mind, you can kind of cast your eyes around, as it were, and notice what other sensations are there. What neutral sensations might be in your experience, or even what pleasurable sensations might you find that aren't sort of front and center for you, but what else is going on. And I think often we can start to really change our experience with little tweaks like this, because a lot of what creates our world and the kind of thinking patterns we return to it again and again is just the ways we have habits that we focus on this part of experience, or we stay with that. And there's a whole universe around that. There's this whole sort of infinite possibility of what we could turn our attention to. And we, without really knowing we're doing it, we again and again choose to focus in a way that probably isn't very helpful, that probably consolidates this sort of sense of the world in a one kind of way. And actually, that's not the only way. And it's probably often quite a painful, limited way of seeing things. So anyway, that's the third instruction from Rob Berbier on this, is after you've kind of applied this, just to really appreciate what changes that new way of looking brings, or that added, that sort of sprinkle of the clear blue sky brings to your experience. And I've done similar practices. I've done a practice quite regularly where you contemplate your experience as though it's a dream, which has had quite a bit in common with that, I think. And when I first started doing that, it didn't have necessarily that strong an effect, but because I kind of kept it up for some time, just sort of looked like just a minute or two here and there every day, it starts to kind of build up to something that you start to really, in that sense of the space or whatever the reflection is, you start to kind of, you can feel quite touched by that altered way of looking, quite kind of moved. And I sort of sometimes I've only got to kind of think of looking at the world in that slightly different way, and I kind of feel a bit of inspiration coming through. So don't expect it to just, you try it once and then it's sort of all your problems go away. It's not quite like that. But if you consistently drop that in, return to that, you'll probably find it builds, and it really is a useful tool for your just how you engage with your everyday life, how you can bring these practices to bear, this wisdom to bear on your everyday life. Now, I'm just going to finish with talking a little bit about a couple of lines that come from Milarepa, who's a favorite Buddhist teacher. He was a yogi in, I think, 10th century Tibet. He spent a lot of time living in caves and meditating all the time. And there's this little passage where he sort of declares who he is, if you like. He sort of says what kind of person he is, what his experience is like. And it's quite pithy, but I find it quite strong. Just this morning in meditation, just one of the lines was sort of enough just to sort of take me on a bit of an exploration of Sunyata in a way. So I'll read it through twice for you, and then I'll just say a couple of things about it, and then that will be where I'll finish with this talk. So Milarepa declares, "I am not a meditator, who sits in ordinary form. I am a spacelike yogi of emptiness. I am not a meditator who sits in ordinary form. I am a spacelike yogi of emptiness. So with the first bit, he says, I'm not a meditator who sits in ordinary form. I understand this as pointing to, as him saying that his experience isn't, he's not overly identified with either his physical body or if you like, returning to the idea of the 10,000 things, he doesn't identify with the ordinary form of those things that we are preoccupied with. Or his name, or his role, or his reputation, all these kind of things that we can kind of strongly identify with. That's not the world that Milarepa believes he's a part of. He's sort of loosened his grip on all of that. He has a very light relationship with those things. There's one story where he talks about ordinary concepts as play words. He doesn't take them completely seriously. It's quite a nice way of thinking, I think. So he's able to relate. He's not of this ordinary form because he's sort of seen the truth of these ordinary forms. He's understood what ordinary form is. It's not so real and solid. It's impermanent. This sort of teaching we hear again and again, that's what Milarepa has seen very clearly. This ordinary form is impermanent. And he doesn't sort of rest upon that because it's impermanent. He doesn't strongly identify with it because it's impermanent or because it's empty, you could say. And then the second line, I'm a space-like yogi of emptiness. So that's him trying to convey what he actually is or how he actually experiences himself. This is what Milarepa relates to. He's not seeing himself as something fixed. He's more of the nature of space and emptiness. He's not something individual and separate anymore. He experiences himself completely open, fluid, changing, in harmony with the nature of things. And it's because he's able to just completely let go and repeatedly let go. Nothing snares him, nothing he gets entangled with. The 10,000 things to him are like the clear blue sky. So I'll just conclude by just once again reading those lines of Milarepa. I am not a meditator who sits in ordinary form. I am a space-like yogi of emptiness. Okay.
Well, thanks, Arthabandhu. Real sense of freedom just hearing that talk, actually. It's really inspired me and actually really challenged me as well, because I've just got so much stuff, frankly. So yeah, lots of opportunities there for us to explore in our groups, and